I represent a company in London called INITION. And for the last 18 years, we have discovered, understood, and applied emergent and immersive technologies. And it was an interesting journey. And we started it, as I said, around 20 years ago by having probably one of the biggest first 3D printer. And we looked at how we can combine 3D printing with augmented reality. Then we've done a lot of stereoscopic filming with 2 cameras, what is a precursor of the 360 nowadays. And we filmed elephants in Africa and pandas in China. And filming a herd of elephants with 2 synchronized cameras 100 meters from each other, it's quite a feat. But we did it, and we tried it, and sometimes we failed it, sometimes it worked. And it was very interesting, because we understood a few things, and I'll come back to that. And we understood the importance of content. We understood the importance of context, something that I heard earlier here. But we also understood the importance of business and the application. And amongst all the clients that we work with, and we work with everyone from British Aerospace to Tata and Bentley, we always had a great affinity for fashion projects, and for fashion in particular, and retail specifically. And the reason for that is because we think that those immersive technologies allow people in fashion to dream. And they allow people in fashion to materialize and visualize those dreams. And they are important because dreaming, it's about communicating. For the first time in this sort of media of virtual reality and augmented reality, we have a media that allows the system to hack our audiovisual part of the brain and give it stimuli that the brain recognizes as real. And that's why if you tried a virtual reality experience, when you're in there, you think you are in there. And that's very important because that hasn't happened before. We've always been looking at a screen, which is a linear 2D experience. We are now in a much more immersive, integrated, empathetic, emotionally strong experience. And that's something that has a profound power. And it will have a profound power in a way we will communicate in the future. So I'll show you a few examples of fashion projects that we've done. And then I'll look a little bit at the future, at where we think the future lies, and just a few things about what we learned from what we've done. So 1 year ago, we were asked by South by Southwest to create a project for them. And luckily at that time, we had some discussions with Philip Tracy. And Philip Tracy, for people who don't know him, it's one of the most famous hat designers in UK. So he designs the hats for the Queen and a lot of celebrities. And he's kindly given us access to his collection of hats. And we took one hat called the Madonna hat. And we wanted to transform it into an experience which actually captures what you feel when you see that sort of hat. Because Philip Tracy's hats are all about shapes, and they almost defy gravity, and they almost, they have surfaces that go in and out. So what we did, we scanned this hat, and we transformed it into a space in which you can walk. And inside that sort of space, you also interact with different things, with other shapes of hats. And when you interact with them, you've got haptic feedback. The sound is binaural, so whenever you move your head, you can hear the sound. A special soundtrack was composed for it. So we created this experience. Okay.
Affect their vibrations for the better, of course. Another place in the universe, up under different stars. That would be where the ultradusting would come in. Equation-wise, the first thing to do is to consider time as officially ended. We work on the other side of time. We'll bring them here through either isotope, teleportation, transmolecularization.
So So whenever people were touching those hats, they were disappearing or morphing into something else. We've also, in order to keep the people interested, VR, it's a very singular experience. So in order to keep the people who are queuing for them, there were lots of queues in South by Southwest. We've also sourced those interesting panels, LED panels, which were really powerful, colorful things. And on those panels, we were showing an abstracted version of the actual experience. But also, the movement of the head was influencing the movement of those images on those panels. Created a very interesting effect which kept everyone, trying to understand what they will get. Another project that we've done and we're quite proud of, we worked with Topshop a few years ago to create the first virtual reality broadcast of a catwalk show. And again, we thought, it's not only an incremental thing, let's do something which is more than just the experience itself. So 5 people who have won some sort of competition were allowed in the Topshop shop on Oxford Street to watch in real time through the medium of virtual reality the catwalk show which was happening in the Tate Modern in the Turbine Hall. But more than that, when they were looking behind, they could transport themselves behind the stage, or they could see also a time lapse of how the stage was designed. There were leaves that had real-time tweets, and the whole experience was a real multimedia experience. So again, I've got a little video with our creative director explaining what was happening.
So it's fantastic and rewarding to see the first 5 competition winners come out of the experience, really be blown away. They've never experienced anything like before. They obviously really enjoyed the show, and the conversations weren't about the technology, it was all about the experience, which is exactly what we wanted.
So for the 5 days, when it ran in London, it created a lot of PR, it created a lot of footfall for Topshop, and it was a really interesting experience. Since then, we've done a lot of other work with British Council, presenting the young international designers, where again, we filmed things in 360 3D, so you could hear the designer talking about its work, but also looking around, you could see the work itself. We've done work with Gareth Pugh at Selfridges, again, something that was presented as, living in a 3D cartoon type of stuff. We've done work with retailers. We work with Harrods, Selfridges. This is some work we've done with Westfield. It was the Future of Fashion pop-up shop, where we created an interesting experience which moved from virtual reality to augmented reality to gestural stuff, and they wanted to present the next generation of fashion and the next generation of seasonal products. Really getting people to interact and explore this sort of stuff in a way which is different. So, why do we do all of those things? Well, apart from the obvious thing, what we really believe is there is an interesting future in this. And I promise that I heard someone else earlier saying that, we're going to move away from mobiles. I promise that that slide was there, so I'm not just plagiarizing now. But we really believe that there comes a time when those headsets, those wearables, the world that we create with those immersive technologies will allow us to move away from this screen back into the world. And explore the world and understand the world in a way that we haven't been able to do before. And at the moment, we are just at the edge of the whole thing. But like with a mobile, which is not just a device, but is connected to the internet and to data and to an ecosystem of applications, when all of those things will come together, when AR and VR will come together with machine learning, which will allow us to understand voice, and express ourselves and understand movement and everything around us. When the connectivity of the IoT will allow us to actually go closer to an object, and what we see in the headset will be influenced by where we are. When sensors will allow us to actually understand, heat and humidity and all sorts of other measurements from the environment, we will have a very, very powerful experience. We're also discussing about new interaction paradigms. So we're talking about voice, gesture, gaze, haptics. What's good about them is that we're moving again to the way we interact in real life. In real life, when I want to speak to someone, I'm not going to go and tap him on his head. I'm just going to look at that person, and that's how I'm selecting why I want to talk to that person. Certainly, we can now explore this sort of interaction, and that's really interesting. But ultimately, what will happen is that we will be able to have a wearable and to look at our physical world with an overlapped virtual world in a way which is contextually intelligent and not really see the difference. And this sort of augmentation will work in two ways. It will work in our physical world augmented by our virtual world, and our virtual world that we will gather through our measurements, augmenting the virtual world. So it will work both ways. And that will be very, very interesting. And that will be a complete different way of understanding, measuring, and communicating in our world. So, what we've learned? Well, we know that generally brands have a threefold challenge. A challenge of signal, distance, and time. Signal, they need to have their voice heard in a sort of sea of noise. Distance, they need to keep their customers close or closer to themselves in every point of the journey. And time, they need to keep the customers engaged. And I think that really those technologies will come into their real power when both the front end and the back end of the systems will come together. So when we're talking about those technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality, we're talking about the front end, we're talking about the experience, we're talking about the imagery, we're talking about the visualization. But just remember now that when you put someone into a virtual reality system, for instance, you can collect a lot of data. Because for the first time, you've got the cognitive and the experience at the same time, happening at the same time. You don't have something where someone is experiencing something and then they have to fill in a form. You can do at the same time measure data. So we're doing some work at the moment with a company in UK called MTech. And they do a headset, actually simple glasses that you can wear under a headset that do three things. They measure heart rate variation. They do what's called electromyography. So they measure imperceptible movements of the muscles around the eyes. And those can be translated into emotions. So it's not only understanding where I'm looking, but understanding why I'm looking there. And at the same time, they can do EEG and, measuring these sort of functions. So you can imagine how you can have a system where the content and how I react to the content is processed through this. All that data is processed, and the content will change based on my feedback loop. So we can create actually real-time content that's generated by my feeling about the content that I see. And that will be extremely interesting. But as I said, in order to really create value, all those systems at some point will have to be integrated with whatever are the legacy systems of a company, so that data can flow in both directions. So just briefly, on a business side, what we understood is that innovation on its own, it's great, but if it doesn't lead to transformation, then it cannot be measured. We also understood that experience is great, but in order to reward people for spending their time into an experience, you have to give them something. You have to layer a certain service over that sort of experience. We also understood that the same sort of service has to go into the product. And again, those technologies can help with that. And we understood that you have to combine the customer value, what they get, with a business value. So I'm just going to leave you with another little clip that shows some of the recent projects that we've done. And don't forget, everything started with a dream. Thank you very much.